The Jonathan Kuminga era needs to end. While he was drafted for his explosive athleticism, he was largely a work in progress from the get-go, an experiment. But as with all experiments, there eventually comes a time where you have to accept the results. And after 4 grueling seasons, where Kuminga has had ample time to prove himself within the Warriors system, I think the reality is pretty clear. He just doesn't fit. The first few years, fans and the media blamed Steve Kerr and the coaching staff for not buying in, for limiting his playing time, for favoring lesser-known assets like Anthony Lamb, and his many DNPs. But if the last 2 seasons have proven anything, it's not that Kuminga isn't a fundamentally solid player. He's become a better scorer, he's found some success in the mid-range, and he's become one of the most explosive wings in the league. But what it has proven, especially evident during the final 15 games of last season, is that he's just not a Golden State Warrior. Let's review. The Warriors are a team about process. There's always something going on in every possession that rewards movement, and that forces even the best offensive players to read and react. Sometimes it starts off with some sort of on-ball screen followed by a cut across the paint. Sometimes it might be an away screen, or it might be Buddy Hield lifting to the corner to give space for that ball screen. It might be an exit screen, which lets a shooter like Steph run into the corner and take a 3. There's always something that rewards flow, but Kuminga's offensive game interrupts that process. And it's not because he's not a good offensive player in any sense, but look in this possession how despite the movement, despite GP2 cutting to this corner, despite Butler cutting underneath the basket, Kuminga's offensive skill set just doesn't reward this type of play. Here, he's going to settle for a turnaround dribble move that turns into this fade, and he's just not reliable enough of a shooter in these situations for that type of isolation scoring to be rewarding. And the end result is that the Warriors are more stagnant, especially when Steph's not on the floor and they need a rhythm. Now, when we look at this end of the shot clock, there's just 5 seconds left. You want some sort of reliable final option. In this situation, notice that Aaron Gordon has Steph cordoned off at the top of the court. There's not much that's going to happen, especially with the lineup of Draymond and Kuminga in terms of floor spacing. And with 5 seconds left, with JK as your go-to option in isolation, he's just not quite skilled enough to use his athleticism or size to punish someone smaller, much less someone who's equally as stout as him with any sort of physicality. And because of this limitation, the Warriors waste a lot of possessions with Kuminga offensively, especially at the end of the shot clock where he gets really inadvisable shots. Now here's another possession where the Warriors have to rely on JK at the end of the shot clock with only about 2 seconds left. And with such a limited arsenal, again, the Raptors are largely happy to stay home, which forces Kuminga, even as he gets into a closer range, to put up a pretty inadvisable little floater. The problem here is that Kuminga largely thrives off of opportunities generated by teammates like a Steph high ball screen, but he just doesn't make them for himself. So we've already talked about Kuminga's limited scoring skill set, which makes it difficult for him to effectively bail out possessions at the very end, because he doesn't have good go-to shots. The Warriors also run a lot of set plays, a lot of sideline out of bounds plays like this, where Post and GP2 are going to set these 2 screens for Buddy Hield to run off, receive this inbound, and either take a 3 or run down into the paint. Sadly, Kuminga's limited skill set, and especially his loose dribble, his weak ball handling skills, means that right now, if you pause, you can see that Hero has done a pretty good job of closing off this opportunity, but Hield is being trapped and pursued behind him, so naturally he's going to want to dump off this ball, and Kuminga's pretty free on the perimeter. There's no one on him, but look what happens to Kuminga's dribble as soon as he gets this pass from Buddy Hield. He essentially takes 1 dribble and immediately has to pick up the ball with this swipe by Tyler Hero, and then the possession is basically just gone. JK just doesn't have great reps as a ball handler or initiator, And because of that loose dribble, he's often forced to pick up fairly early. And finally, Kuminga's just not that great of a three-point shooter. This allows defenses to play in fairly standard alignments and largely stay home. Obviously, the assignment is easy on Kuminga, which means the Warriors can't generate offensive advantages like they want to, especially if they already have another non-shooter on the floor, which they usually will with Draymond Green. And then you're just adding so many more limitations to their offensive flow. There's really no floor spacing upside with Kuminga unless you surround him with shooters. Now, here's Adish to talk about the incredibly drawn-out Kuminga contract situation.
Jonathan Kuminga has been the talk of the summer for all Warriors fans. The way he's been manipulating the Warriors has been devious to say the least. And the reasons might not seem so obvious. You may think the Warriors should be able to sign all of their other players and the rest of their roster without worrying about Kuminga. But that's where many Warriors fans are wrong, and why I believe it needs a deeper explanation. So let's go into detail about what exactly the Warriors' salary cap is looking like right now. It's Steph Curry, Jimmy Butler, Draymond Green, Moses Moody, Buddy Hield, Brandon Pajemski, Guy Santos, Trace Jackson-Davis, Quinton Post, and Jackson Rowe. That's the only players on the roster, which equals a total of 10 players. And we can't really count Jackson Rowe because he's a two-way player and works a little bit differently with the salary cap. But obviously, Jonathan Kuminga is supposed to be on this roster, right? We sent him the qualifying offer. Well, what that counts as is a cap hold. And right now, the Warriors are under the salary cap by $25,000, specifically the first apron. And the second apron is at $36 million, which is the second apron. The Warriors aren't going to go over the second apron this season specifically because of the many penalties that we've seen in the past that it can have. Just look at the Phoenix Suns as a great example. $25 million, on the other hand, getting to that first apron, the Warriors will likely get over. And that's where Kuminga comes into play. Right now, he's extended about a $10 million qualifying offer. Now, $10 million sounds like a lot of money, but for somebody like Kuminga, he's definitely worth a little bit more, which is why I don't believe he's going to accept that qualifying offer. But the reason everyone's waiting on him is because we can't go above $36 million. But Kuminga could sign anywhere from $10 million on a one-year deal to what the Warriors reportedly offered him, about $15 to $20 million a year. And Kuminga's camp is actually searching for something like a super salary deal where he basically gets a one-year deal for $25 million. And that changes everything because the Warriors only have 10 players on the roster. And they're looking at players like Anthony Mellon, Gary Payton II coming back on a contract, and maybe more importantly, Al Horford. And signing these players requires us to manipulate the salary cap. And what's important to realize is that second apron includes minimum signings and veteran players. So if Jonathan Kuminga were to get a $30 million deal, the Warriors would have to give up on somebody like Al Horford. And if they were to sign all of the players like Al Horford, DeAnthony Mellon, Gary Payton II, and let's say in total they all cost about $12 to $13 million for the next year, the Warriors might not be able to match a Kuminga offer without paying heavy penalties. And that would be severely debilitating for the chance for this team to compete this year and next year with everyone on the roster currently. That's why it matters the order of which players are signed. It matters that Kuminga goes first and then the other players follow. Furthermore, if the other players are signed and then we believe there's a certain range in which Kuminga gets signed, another team could also trade for extra cap space, match an offer or put out an offer sheet to Jonathan Kuminga, and then the Warriors potentially might not be able to match. An example like this could really look like Brooklyn, for example, trading away one of their higher salary guys and then having an extra $20 million in cap space, and then the Warriors signing players so that they only slot Kuminga in for a $15 million contract between the second apron. They could only give him a $15 million contract, and then an offer sheet from Brooklyn would come for $20 million, and the Warriors just couldn't match that offer sheet, and they'd have to give him away basically for nothing in return. I feel like overall, though, it seems like the Kuminga situation should resolve soon, with training camp really only about 2 weeks away, even less than 2 weeks. And I feel like the Warriors will finally have answers at that position. And hopefully we can get Al Horford and the other players signed to the roster so they can finally start practicing together and we can finally have a cohesive team. But this Kuminga drama doesn't die after just this week or whenever he signs. The deal he signs is going to heavily influence how he feels on the team. If he signs the deal that he's hoping for with player options, he's likely going to be demanding minutes from the team and trying to make sure that he's a star and has a featured role. If he has a team option, it might be a little bit different. He might be discontent, he might want to trade and be continuously requesting a trade and maybe pouting on the bench. And so I think it's important that Kuminga feels like the offer is fair. And that's why the Warriors, I think, aren't going super low in terms of the monetary value or forcing him to just sign the qualifying offer or sign a bad deal. They're trying to make him feel welcomed. And that's why the 3-year deal for around $70 million came out. I believe because the Warriors want him on the team and want him to feel motivated because they understand that we can't waste the last years of Stephen Curry. Overall, I hope this situation resolves soon. But this is really the only thing happening in Warriors lands for really since the end of the season, and I really hope it gets resolved soon.
During this film review, we've left one very important thing out: defense. There's plenty of game film to parse where Kuminga simply doesn't show the requisite defensive effort for a player of his athletic ability. In possessions where he should be hounding ball handlers and hustling for closeouts, he just doesn't. And for Steve Kerr and a Warriors team that has built itself on a well-oiled defensive machine just as much as it has their beautiful offense, that won't cut it. But even without considering his defensive weaknesses and the salary cap situation, I'd firmly say that Kuminga doesn't belong. The Warriors, maybe more than any other team in the league, is a team about fit. Their offensive scheme requires buy-in, the ability to make timely reads, and above-average passing or shooting ability. But after 4 long years with the Warriors, Kuminga has shown us that he simply doesn't have any of those qualities. Thanks for watching. Let us know if you agree.